Morning. Okay. So, up until now, explained what was it that would define the klipa of Mitzrayim. On the surface, it seems that Paro was a king of Egypt who embodied a tremendous force of impurity, a klipa, and Tam, good morning, welcome back. Making enough noise.
It's weird, right?
Okay. Baruch Hashem. So I would think, what is the klipa? They deny Hashem. So the Maimon explains, no, that's not what it was. They knew that Hashem exists. And they knew that Hashem is who he is, very powerful. He's the creator of the universe. But they believe that Hashem has nothing to do with this physical earth and this low world. In fact, they believe that they have the better perception of Hashem. They rarely honor and see the greatness of Hashem, that he's so great, that he's so infinite, that he's so amazing, that it would be a disgrace to say that he's busy with what's going on in this world. I failed to mention yesterday, because yesterday was Wednesday, and Wednesday every day we read a chapter of Tehillim, which they used to sing in the Beis Hamikdash. I wanted to draw your attention to yesterday's chapter of Tehillim, and I'll read it to you now. You'll recognize it, where it says these words: "At Mosai Rishayim, how long you wicked people will be so wicked?" And then he goes on to say that they torture people and they torment people, widows, and they torture children that are orphans, and they say God doesn't see anything and God doesn't hear anything. How foolish can you be? He created the ears and he created the eyes. Of course he sees and he hears. Who is King David talking to? He's not talking to somebody who's an absolute fool. The Torah doesn't deal with people who are not normal and don't have normal intelligence, and they have some foolish ideas, and the Torah comes along to tell us that's not what Torah is about. Torah is about the true understanding, but dealing with logic, not with stupidity. And the answer is what it says in this kapitel. You look again, you'll see is exactly what it says in this mimer. They say Hashem doesn't hear and he doesn't see what's going on here in this world because that doesn't interest him. He's so much greater than that. Right now, as we're talking, on this floor, I can't tell you where exactly, is the little ant that's doing a dance. And nobody's even watching. Nobody's looking. Nobody is being entertained by it. And not only that, you don't even see it. You don't even know where it is because it's so small and it sort of doesn't even exist in our world. We're in a different realm, or a different plane. We deal with humans and things that are above that. So that's small in a physical sense. So that's saying Hashem is infinite. The world is so much smaller in the spiritual sense. It's insignificant. It doesn't count. It's as if it doesn't exist. And therefore, it would actually be an offense to say that Hashem engages with little things in this physical world. What's the end result? Oh, if that's the case, we can kill, we can steal, we can torment, we can torture, because clearly this thought process is not coming from true intelligence, coming from klipa. And that's what Paro said. I can do whatever I want here. And he goes by the gods and by nature and by other things, constellations, the stars, the moon, the sun, but not Hashem, because Hashem doesn't exist here. And the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu came and performed the miracles and did everything he did was to clearly show Paro and Egypt and more than anything else, the spiritual klipa that you are wrong, and Hashem is in control of every little detail down here, just like up there. And the reason is, we explained in the previous classes, because Hashem is absolute, infinite. And infinite, there is no difference between higher and lower. There's nothing closer and further. The highest heavens aren't closer to him than the lowest, little spot here on earth. Then the most physical, concrete rock here on earth is just as far from Hashem, who's infinite, as the highest level of Atzilus, in the same distance. Makes no difference whatsoever, because that's finite and this is finite. The difference is infinite. So we're on page 45, 46. And we're starting 4. Chapter 4, paragraph 4. So now let's go back to the original question that I asked by the Erev Rab. How were they able to possibly convince the Yidden who just saw miracles in Egypt to go worship an idol and to worship a golden calf? It said the Erev Rab, Rotzu ahakach lichbar b'zeh. So basically, they changed and they became part of the Jewish nation. But obviously, these were their beliefs before, and this is the way they grew up before. And apparently, when there was a little bit of a shakeup, they went back to their old beliefs. And they tried to deny what we just learned. When Moshe Rabbeinu was delayed from returning from the mountain, so they started to have questions in their belief. What? In your copy?
I forgot which mine are.
Yes, you were a long time ago. So the lesson is, don't ever get sick again. That's all.
Don't what?
Don't ever get sick again. Don't get any cold.
I wish. It's horrible to not come here.
Okay. And I see for Sarah that in addition to that, they did something even more rebellious. Shirotzu, Shigam Yisrael, Yosuru. Not only they themselves lost their true faith and they sort of fell back, they retreated to where they used to be. They tried to convince the Yidden they should also believe that. Yishmi al Yisrael, they tried to convince the Yidden. The truth is the way they thought. That those who control the world are the constellations and the ministering angels that are up there. And, and therefore, they said, Mashaloku hamitzim, the fact that the Egyptians were stricken and they were defeated, and their mazel, their gods, their constellations, which gives them power, wasn't capable of helping them. Not only did Hashem bring plagues upon the Egyptians, he brought plagues upon their gods. Like we just learned in the Parsha yesterday, that the first plague was the Nile. That's one of their gods. They said, this is not because Hashem is the real leader, and therefore he was able to totally eliminate the other forces. A different reason. And it goes into what was going on in their head. There are 12 constellations in the sky. Mazel Mitzrayim, the constellation which is connected to Egypt, is Tleh. Tleh is a sheep. That's the constellation of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said to Parei, "Hey, Nizbach es teves Mitzrayim leineim." We're going to sacrifice that animal, which is their god, right in front of their eyes, and they would see that this God is not a God, they have no power. Okay, do, and it's known. One of the main mitzvahs of Pesach was to bring a paschal sacrifice, to take a sheep and bring that as a korban. Why a sheep? That's in all the laws not to break the bone. The way they brought the sacrifice was they couldn't break it and put it into a pot. It's a very interesting thing. The Abisha said it has to be roasted. So when it's roasted, it's out on the outside. And also they had to roast it complete, which means, of course, the animal was slaughtered first, but the meat and everything was above the fire. So they say that people were saying, the Egyptians, this is their God. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are places in the world today, like India, where they have that too. If you ever traveled to India or you know someone who went to India, animals are very much respected over there. That's where the term holy cow comes from. So basically they worship these cows, they worship animals. So imagine you take this animal, that's their God, and you're shechting it. So the Yidden said, let's at least break it up into small pieces and put it into a pot and cover it. Hashem said, no, it has to be outside, which means that you can see that it's a sheep. Not only that, when it's on the outside, there's a lot of smoke, so it goes all over the place. So it was deliberately for that purpose, to show them that their perception of God is absolutely insane. There is no substance to what they consider God, which is the constellation. It wasn't about the sheep. It was really about the constellation, which is something that has power, but not independent power. In other words, the physical sheep down here, in some way, but in Egypt, this embodied, and this to them was a reflection of the constellation Lamaila. And this is also the reason in Chumash, we just learned in the Parsha, that Joseph said he can't eat with the Shvatim, even the Hebrews can't eat together with the Egyptians because they eat meat of sheep and the Egyptians don't. Why not? Because it's their God. What? Vegan, yeah. They were way ahead of us.
They don't eat all the animals or only?
No, it looks like mainly those that they worship, the sheep, mainly the sheep. So what do? So they believe that the constellations are in charge. And they said they went in a very underhanded way to try to convince the Jews. There was another constellation. When you read these Baba Mises, these fairy tales, it's about the gods up there fighting. So they believe that the constellation, which is the ox, was fighting with the constellation, which is a sheep. And that's the reason why the sheep was defeated. Not Hashem defeated it, but the other constellation, which is the ox, he had a fight with the sheep. As it says, that there is a war between the Mazolas. There's a pasuk in the book of Daniel that describes this kind of a scenario. There's a Mitzrayim. So they said the same thing happened in Egypt. So the fact that their God couldn't help them is not because of Hashem, it's because a different God knocked them out, Nebuch. So believe that all the constellations, they run the world. The only question is which one of the constellations will overpower the other. And that's why they suggested, let's make an ox. Egel is an ox. The purpose why they did that was to make them stumble, that they should worship the constellation of a shur, of an ox, because according to their understanding, that's what really overpowered Mitzrayim. So we ask a question, are they stupid? They're going to worship a cow, a golden calf that they just created themselves and say, this took us out of Egypt? It's not the cow. It was about worshiping the constellation, which did exist before, and saying that constellation, which is the ox, that's not what got them out of Egypt. So in a way, it's just the same like we're experiencing today, but at a much different level, that something happens, the life is saved. Is it like, wow, this doctor, he deserves all the credit in the world? Or is it, wow, Hashem really saved my life and I have to do something to thank him? You know what? It's the same thing on a much sort of more subtle way. This person's attributing the success to the doctor, and this person's attributing the success to the Eibishter. And what, we don't recognize the doctor? No, you do recognize, you're supposed to say thank you, you're supposed to acknowledge and show your gratitude, but we believe that Hashem is doing it through the doctor. And the same thing here, they were trying to convince them there was another force that got your guys out of Egypt. It wasn't Hashem. And we still maintain the old philosophy that Hashem is not really connected to the physical world. Is it clear?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who is
Rav? When the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, a lot of the Egyptians wanted to join the Jewish nation, go out with them. And Moshe Rabbeinu accepted them. So they're called Rav, which means a multitude of people of Egypt joined the Yidden. According to Chassidus and according to Kabbalah, we know that in Egypt, that's where the sparks were that had to be elevated. And that's why Hashem told them to take pots and pans and other things from the Egyptians. It wasn't about the pots and the pans. It was because in these objects and these articles, that's where the sparks were. And by taking it away from them and then using it in a Kedusha way, that's how they elevated the sparks. It was part of a major part of the process of elevating the sparks. So the people also embodied some of those sparks. And by joining the Yidden, that was another part of the process of elevating the sparks. But who were they? They were Egyptians. And for them, when the test happened, it shook up their belief.
Now is our
What?
Who is now
Can't reveal that. I wasn't given permission.
Fine.
I'm just joking. We don't know. When someone gets angry at somebody else, says, "Oh, you're from the Arab route." That's we have no knowledge.
Because now a lot of people say that.
I know. I heard. Yeah. When someone does something wrong, he must be from the Arab route. But we don't understand.
He loved learning Torah.
Okay. When it comes to this understanding of, it looks like, it's very simple to understand, but really, one of the reasons why Kabbalah is called Kabbalah, why is it called Kabbalah? Kabbalah means to receive. In other words, you're talking about knowledge of what's going on in the spiritual world. These are not things that you can understand with intellect. You can be the smartest person in the world, but Kabbalah, it's a different world, it's a different realm, and you have to receive it from an authority that knows what's going on in the highest spiritual realm. So Kabbalah is where great sages receive from an earlier sage, who receives from an earlier sage, who receives from an earlier sage. So for someone to come along and say, this is probably the Arab route. I mean, if you want to say something just to stab somebody, okay, isn't it hate? But to say we really understand what's what, we don't understand. It reminds me of a story. Someone wrote the story, he heard it from the person himself that it happened to him. That he was not a Chabad Chassid. He lived in another neighborhood a long time ago, in the early 1950s. And his sister was very sick. So he came to get a bracha for the Rebbe. Never saw the Rebbe before. But he heard, even though it was very early, the Rebbe just became a Rebbe. He was very young. Nevertheless, he heard that the Rebbe's brachas are very effective. So he comes to, Crown Heights. He knows it's on Eastern Parkway, but doesn't know where. And he meets a young man, which happened to be the Rebbe. And he says, and the Rebbe used to walk by himself. The Rebbe didn't have any escorts, didn't wear special garments. If you saw the Rebbe walking down the street, you might think he's just like anybody else, unless you see the difference between someone who is distinguished and not an ordinary person. But he sees this man and he says to him, could you tell me where I can find the Lubavitcher Rebbe? So he said to him, why? He says, I need a bracha for my sister and that. So the Rebbe said, in the place where you live, there's so many rabbis. Why do you have to come here for? So he got very upset. And he said to the Rebbe, you have no concept of what a Rebbe is. Your understanding of a Rebbe is like a goat looking at the moon. The Rebbe walked away. Then it comes to 770. The Rebbe walks in and he faints. The Rebbe gave him a bracha and he had his bracha that he needed. So we have our concept of Kabbalah is like a goat looking at the moon. You ever see a goat looking up? He's looking at the moon. What does he understand? He sees the moon. A circle of cheese. So here we come into the point, now that we understand a little bit deeper what the issue was, we see why the women were so much stronger than the men. The women were much stronger. They didn't participate and they weren't convinced by the Erev Rav. They didn't contribute their jewelry for the golden calf because they didn't accept what they were saying. Why? It's that Sherish and they're saying this has to do with the source of a woman's neshama. Just like in the physical realm, there's male and female. In the spiritual realm, there's also a realm which is male, masculine, and there's a realm which is female. And basically, the difference between the neshama of a man and the neshama of a woman is that men's neshama come from the masculine realm, and women's neshama come from the feminine. So generally speaking, what's masculine, what's feminine? The sphere of Malchus is feminine in Kabbalah. The spheres of Zah, the six, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, or otherwise known as the Ir Ampin, that's the masculine. Now, of course, men have in them Malchus, and women have in them the other six as well. But it means the source of the woman's neshama from the heavenly spiritual realm is primarily from the sphere of Malchus, the seventh sphere. And this is what it says in many places in Kabbalah. We have this in davening, that when you do a mitzvah, you're creating a union between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shekhinah. That's in simple language. And the deeper language is we're bringing together masculine and feminine. And just like down here, when there's a marriage, so between husband and wife, and they come together as one, they bring into the world new life, a child that's born, and that leads to more children and so on. So in the same thing in the heavenly realm, when there's a union, an emerging of the masculine and the feminine, then this creates new spiritual godly light in the world. And really every mitzvah is in a certain way bringing together masculine and feminine. And there's a lot of details to this and why is it, what is the difference between one mitzvah and another. But again, generally speaking, women identify with the sphere of Malchus, men identify with the six spheres. And Malchus is Reishal Kol Ayin Sar Shalamayim. Malchus is the source of all the 70 ministering angels. What does that mean? We know in the story in Chumash that Yaakov was having this confrontation with the angel of Esau. But not only Esau, every one of the 70 nations has an angel that's in charge of the entire nation. And we spoke about this once, even though there are much more than 70 nations today, there are much more than 70 countries. I think in the UN there's like 120 countries. But nevertheless, according to Torah, there are 70 major primary countries, and these are the 70 angels. And then there are countries which are branches, extensions, but as far as major countries, there are 70. There always was and there always will be, and they're connected to the 70 angels. And then Ratem is going to ask me, so which countries are they? This secret I can tell you. We don't know all of them, but it does say in the Sikha that those countries that are more influential in the world are probably from the countries that have that angel. And like United States, a country like France, a country like England, a country like Russia, the bigger countries are the ones, and all the other countries are extensions. So what's the source of the source? What's the source of the 70 angels that are responsible for all the influence that goes to the 70 nations? The source for that is Malchus. So therefore, because they come from Malchus, which is the source of the 70 angels, they felt in their soul, in other words, it was something which they felt inherently, subconsciously, that ein mamish b'mazolas v'sarim hanal. So they felt it in their soul, and they sort of felt it in their gut more than the men. The soul of the man that comes from the level of masculine, which is let's turn the page 51, 52, 53. What? No, both are from Atzilus, but women come from Malchut of Atzilus, and men come from Zoh of Atzilus, the 6 spheres above Malchus. Zoh stands for Ze'er Anpin, but it's the 6. It's like in the day of the week we have 7 days. There are 6 days, and there's a 7th, which is different. The 7th day is Malchus. The 6 days is Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod Yisod. That's why Malchus is called the queen. I mean, Shabbos is called the queen because Shabbos is Malchus and Malchus is feminine. So the neshama of the men comes from a higher place. And because it's higher, it's more removed from the physical world. In other words, the neshama of the women, which comes from Malchus, is the source for the angels that are in charge of the physical world. So they're more in touch with what's going on, how godliness controls the physical world. The men's neshama come from the other spheres, which is more in touch with the higher spiritual worlds. Therefore, those that deny Hashgacha Pratis, they say that Hashem is in the heavens. That's the place of Zod of Atzilus. But Hashem is not involved with the lower things. The lower things, there's sort of Malchus that controls it. but the women, they felt the connection between Hashem and everything going on in the world so much more clear because they are that source in Hashem that controls the world. I don't know if you got this point. We'll chew it over again, but just ask me if you have a question of what I just said.
I don't get how the 70 nations relate to the okay, the sources from Malchus.
Because the 70 angels, which are in charge of the 70 nations, these are the angels to which all the forces of nature go through them. In other words, let's say in Mitzrayim, we're living in a country, they have us as slaves and they're making us do this, they're chasing after us. Everything they did comes from that angel. That's their force. But the truth is, it's not an angel, it's all from Hashem. But they attribute it to their angel. They attribute it to one of the constellations. And therefore, once you understand that it's not the angel, it's not the constellation, it's all Hashem, so if Hashem chooses to take me out of Mitzrayim, nobody can stop me. But in their mind, it's angels that are in charge, or constellations that are in charge. So the women come from that sphere, which is the source of all the 70 nations. Well, not the source of all the 70 angels, which are the source. These are the channels through which all the yadam of nature go through them. Everything that's happening in nature goes from the 70 angels to the constellations, and it funnels through to this physical world. So the women come from that place in the spiritual realm that feels the connection between Hashem and the 70 nations. The men, dafka, because they come from a more lofty level, therefore they are not as aware and as conscious of the connection to the physical realm as the women are. To feel godliness in the physical realm. it's not the same at all, but it's just an interesting. Normally, if you ask a question, what's a greater way of serving Hashem? Where's there more of an advantage? Sitting and learning Torah all day, or being in the business world and learning an hour a day, doing your business honestly? The average person will tell you learning all day and davening and learning and engaging in spirituality the whole day is so much greater than being in the business world, which is true. But then it says that one of the advantages of being in the business world is that's a place where you see hashgacha pratis much more than in the Torah world. When you're doing business, who you meet and when you happen to meet them, and a business deal that comes up or something else that could have gone wrong or didn't go wrong, you see how things are being, if you look with the eyes of Torah, you see more clearly how Hashem is conducting everything here in this physical world. A person who's locked in a base medrash and is sitting on a bench and learning Torah doesn't have a chance to see so much hashgacha pratis. So what I'm saying is the person who's out there is much more in tune to how Hashem is involved in the details of creation. And therefore, a woman whose source is from Malchus, which Malchus is the source of the 70 angels. The 70 angels are the source of the constellations. The constellations are the source for all the things in the natural order. Women are much more aware and conscious, and much more, they feel in a much more pronounced way, in a much more natural way, the connection between Hashem and the world. Comprendo? That's the reason why Yidden, we count, and our year goes by the moon and not by the sun. The nations of the world, they are compared to the sun, and they go by the sun. And we are compared to the moon, and we go by the moon cycle. Even though the sun seems to be so much greater than the moon, I guess the light is so much brighter. The moon is just a reflection of the sun's light. But the sun is so much brighter and bigger and brings so much more light to the world. Nevertheless, that is the mistake, because they're connected more to the sun, something which is brighter and higher and more spiritual, so to speak, in some ways. And therefore they felt that's where Hashem belongs, in the Ruchnizik realm. But he has no part in the Gashmizik running of things. But Yidden, we count by the moon. What does that mean? This means to say that Hashem, just like He's Elokei ha'aretz, Elokei ha'shamayim, He's the God of earth, just like He's the God in heaven. Maila umata shavim, the fun of His barak. Heaven and earth are both equal. Hashem is infinite, like we said before, and in comparison to infinite, the highest finite, which is heaven, and the lowest finite, which is earth, are equal distance, all the same. Page 54, 55. Even though the earth is so much lower than Shemayim, spiritually, it's so much more physical, material, coarse compared to heaven. Hashem, to Hashem, it's a degradation. He has to lower himself to supervise all the details up there, no different than supervise all the details down here, because it's equal distance from him. He's so high, he's so infinite, that therefore, he has to lower himself to see things in the heaven and to see similar things in the earth. So just like you nations of the world believe that Hashem is in Shemayim and is in charge of the heavens, so if you believe that, then He's just the same in charge of the earth, because if He can be in charge of that, can He be in charge of this? It's all the same. And when they attribute that the heavens are closer to Hashem than the earth, they're basically not exalting Hashem, they're lowering Hashem. They're saying that Hashem is somewhat finite, and therefore heaven is closer to Him than earth. Achini hanoshim, that women, because their spiritual roots are in the sphere of Malchus. One of the differences between the sun and the moon is that the sun, there are no changes. The sun is the same from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. And the moon wanes every month. There's higher, more light, less light. Same thing is with the feminine cycle, which is a reflection of the fact that the women, their source is the moon, which is Malchus. In a sense, just like in the spheres, the 6 spheres, that's the source of light for Malchus. Malchus is the recipient, and the 6 spheres gives light to Malchus. And Malchus, in return, takes this light and transmits it to all the worlds. That's how, in the same as with the sun and the moon, that the moon is really just a reflection of the sun's light. Because the moon, its source, is from the sphere of Malchus. In a sense, how can you say that about Shabbos? Think of it. There's a famous quote: if you don't work before Shabbos, you have nothing to eat on Shabbos. This is before the days of taking out food. If you don't cook before Shabbos, you won't have what to eat. Of course, it's possible that I didn't cook, but my neighbor cooked. It means in order to have food on Shabbos, someone has to do work. The 6 days of the week, they provide for Shabbos. That's how I'm able to have wine. That's how I'm able to have kiddush and food and drinks and meat and fish through the work. In other words, the 6 days of the week represent the six spheres. They give and provide the spiritual flow of energy to Malchus. So they did not accept the words of the Erev Rab regarding the Egel, to think that, God forbid, there's another constellation that's overpowering this constellation. They were clear, it was clear in their head, know that it's Hashem, and Hashem is in charge of earth just like he's in charge of heaven. So this is interesting, even though they saw these miracles, and you see an interesting thing that if a person is not strong in their emunah, even if things are like, it's blaring in your face, you can deny it if you really want to. I remember Ravel was once giving a lecture, and he gave an introduction, which I thought was a very powerful perspective. And he said, actually, this point, that if you want to believe in God, you'll see that it's as logical as can possibly be. And if you don't want to, then no matter what I'll say and what I'll explain and what kind of proof I'll bring will make no difference. You have to be open to be able to believe and be objective. And he gave an example. He said, when you have to believe about Egypt, about the story of Hanukkah, Purim, it happened thousands of years ago. Look, just a little while ago, not that long ago, there was a Holocaust. 6 million Jews, Rahman al-Stan, were murdered. 1 million children were murdered. The stories that happen with people are absolutely insane. There are living people walking around with numbers on their hands from the Holocaust, their children, their grandchildren. And yet, there's this big percentage of people that will tell you what? It never happened. It just happened. It's not 6,000 years ago. It just happened. And yet, people, they don't want to believe it because of their anti-Semites. So therefore, they deny that it happened, or whatever other motive they have for not believing. So basically, if you don't want to, you won't see it. So here, they saw miracles. One miracle, another miracle, another miracle. But if you don't have the premise that you believe in Hashem, then you'll find every sort of different kind of explanation rather than saying that's Hashem. It's like science. People say, I study science and I don't believe in God. That's because that's your premise. A person who believes in God and studies science, every new thing he learns about his science, his mind is blown when he thinks of the greatness of Hashem. He learns more about the stars, the moon, the constellations, the galaxies, what's up there, what Hashem created. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's no words to describe the greatness of Hashem. The more you study science, the more you're blown away. And a person who doesn't believe in Hashem, the more they study science, the more they start believing that there's something else other than Hashem. And that's one of the places where we see how close we are to Mashiach, because science is really the place where it all started in a very big way, that people around the world that always used to believe in God started denying God because they started to believe in science. Today, science is a place where science itself is proving that there has to be a higher being, a creator, because the more they study science, they see that it's absolutely insane to think. I remember when they first discovered all the details of the DNA, there was an article, I forgot the guy's name, I remember his last name was Flew. He was the head, and he led a group of atheists around the world, like a world organization of atheists for 50 years. Anthony Flew, and he was in England. And he said, after seeing this, he believes that there's got to be someone, an intelligence that put this world together. It's just impossible that something so complex like DNA, and the more you read about DNA, I read one way, to believe that this came by chance, you have to be absolutely insane. So the more they study science, they come to recognize, and that's where we're coming closer to Mashiach. And one more paragraph, but I'm not going to say it now because then we'll have nothing to teach tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll finish the Bible. Okay.